everyone. My Saturday has sucked. I hope yours has been much, much better. Let's just say my day started actually last night, uh, like at like 8-ish. Actually, it was no, I think it started at closer to 6, but it went till 8 until we were formulating a plan. Uh, and the water main at my house broke, and it was like just on our side of the property, like barely. It was just on our side of the property. So we have to pay for it. It was fun. Um Things turned out better than I expected though. It's been handled, everything that happened, like it started with that. I had two other things that were very stressful happen as well, but everything's been rectified, and everything's good. Like, it didn't, knock on wood, to the gods that are listening. I am grateful, and I do not wish for more challenges, please. Um it just completely threw off my weekend though, so why not add to the chaos and record when I don't normally record? So we're just gonna go ahead and continue listening to the Happy New Year episode of Unsolicited Fatties Talk Back. We have about 45 minutes left. I don't know how far we're gonna get into this. Um, at least around like 25-ish minutes. Um, who knows though? We might listen to the whole thing. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. We're just gonna listen and see where this takes us.
So I've been like stuck with that piece of the column or that piece of the like reader's review or whatever. Um, since reading this because it's like um, that is some really harmful shit. Like having to navigate that type of work environment is really harmful and does like such a disservice to the worker because there's almost nothing you can do about it. There's nothing that you can do to like hold your boss accountable. You know, if there's no board members, if there's no HR, if there's like nobody there to hold you accountable besides a fucking kumbaya circle, like you have nothing to do to actually help you move past all of the bullshit that you're navigating. So that has always been so frustrating. But I think it's even worse when considering that you do have something like this, something that is so detrimental, right? We know how harmful diets are. We know how violent it is to force exercise onto people, right? Like we know what exercise as punishment does because that is the very culture of exercise itself.
Okay, this is where I think they're going too far. This whole thing, the 75 hard thing, you guys have chimed in on it on the last video. I was able to look more into it. Like, it's meant to be a mental toughness challenge, and the whole point of it is to be like this by is essentially to be ridiculously hard. This isn't exercise as a punishment. It is exercise as this kind of weird toughness training. Like, this isn't, we're not, I don't take this as exercise as punishment. I take this as kind of like just an extreme look at exercise. And I mean, twice a day. Twice a day. I think it was like 45 minutes, wasn't it? Twice a day, 45 minutes. And one has to be outside. Because one, it was all about like a mental toughness training. And it was bonkers in my opinion. Like, I think it's bonkers. I don't think that it's great for anyone to really do unless maybe you're already kind of an athlete. I mean, you do you, it's your body, you do what you want. Enforcing it in a workplace is fucking bonkers. And if they're not paying you, and if you can get it in writing that this is meant to be something, well, actually, I don't know, with no HR, kind of depends on where they are, I guess. Are they in the US? I feel like there's some worker protection around this, maybe. Maybe, not guaranteed. But if it's not listed in your employment contract either, like check your employment contract, there might be a way around it. It might even be worth if you can get all of this in documented form. maybe getting a labor force lawyer, like a labor law, someone who specializes in labor laws and civil liberties and that sort of thing might be able to help you. But like that can be expensive for sure, especially to get a good one. And sometimes even for like a semi, just like a semi decent lawyer, it can be expensive. So yeah, it's honestly, uh, if it were me, engage in what you can to like put forth a show of effort. Like you don't have to try that hard, but just like act like you're trying, and it's just you're not physically able to keep up, whether you are or not is not their business. And start looking for other jobs. Like that's the best you can do, I think.
We know how punish or how harmful that is, and to be navigating a workspace that does that to you and you can do nothing about it, because we also know that almost all states in the US have no legal protections for fat people in the workspace. Like navigating all these things at one time and being told like,
Honestly, I don't really think that protection specifically for fat people is needed. In general, everything kind of falls like most employers aren't necessarily going to target you because you're fat. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. And I'm coming from a perspective of working only in government positions my entire career. I worked at a public library and I've worked at schools. Like that's pretty much my work experience. So, in terms of governmental contract places, they're going to be pretty wide scope in their like equal treatment and non-discrimination behaviors, simply for the fact that they are the state and they don't, it's going to be really bad for them if it appears they're being picked on for something that is not directly related to their job. uh but I also live in a very pro union, pro labor law state, so that also colors my views. But I don't think that this is necessarily something about needing protection for fat people. This is an unreasonable ask no matter what weight and what fitness level you are. 75 hard after I took a look, like it's just kind of bonkers. It's very extreme. It's meant to be extreme. It's meant to be a mental toughness challenge. It is for the hardcore people. It is not something that should be engaged in a workplace. It's not meant for that, and nor should it be forced on someone. This has nothing to do with weight and all to do with a completely unreasonable manager that honestly, I think though that so here's the one thing that you guys could do. If it's mandated as responsible for your job and there's no way for you to legally get out of it, you could potentially like as long as you get everything documented, you might make a show of like, hey, just so you know, if I get injured on the job, I have like I think they have the right to sue over that, don't they? Or at the very least, it would have to be covered by L&I, wouldn't it? I mean, it's something. Although I mean, you probably wouldn't want to make a show of that because then it might seem premeditated. And honestly, so I had like a really bad um tendonitis in both arms to the point where my muscles were hyper fatigued and I had tremors. And it took like 8 months for me to get functional again. And my the L&I people later put me through like did this, it was like a 30-minute test sort of thing to make sure like I wouldn't relapse or something. The type of testing, the test that they did was virtually the same as what my physical therapist did, but my physical therapist was far more, it's not thorough, but like there was a part of what I had to do was raise my arms to shoulder level and they had to like try to push my arm down, and this was to help gauge pain and what I could comfortably withstand. And my physical therapist put like a reasonable amount of weight where the L&I guy like just barely touched my arm at all. It was the same test, but the force that was used was wildly different, and this is how they kind of get away with it's like, well, no, they didn't show any signs of pain or anything. Well, not with very few people would feel pain with the tiny amount of force that was. I mean, he barely. I like basically put his hand, so if the arm is stretched out and he's putting the hand roughly on my elbow and one on my shoulder, and then you press down. My physical therapist like pressed like if you were trying to pull a lever, but the lever's like slightly stuck, so it's like some force. The L&I guy that was testing was like it was barely more than just resting his hand there. It was barely more, barely bit like I have first graders that could put more force behind that than what that guy did. So it's there is issues with potentially going to L&I, especially if you're an honest person.
Well, if you don't do this, then it will negatively impact how you show up in the company, which really could mean that you can get fired and there's nothing you can do about it because you're fat. And that's technically not something that can be discriminated against.
This isn't about fatness. This is about an unreasonable ask. Honestly, genuinely, because I'm actually on their side. This manager is fucking loco if he thinks that this is an appropriate ask of the employees that work under him. It is bonkers and it should not be asked of them. This is not a fat issue. This is a workers' rights issue because this is like this can cause undue harm. Like seriously.
By law, then you are now unemployed, struggling to eat, struggling to keep your roof over your head, struggling to take care of your kids if you have kids, struggling to take care of your partner if you have a partner. All these things that like now come under fire because you decided to defend yourself against really fat phobic workspace environment. And I think that like that's just so fucked up, and it's just such a big part of the workforce that thin people in particular, don't ever have to really consider. Like, they don't ever have to consider that you will have to put your body in harm's way as a fat person to be able to live at all, like an inkling of a good life. And I think that's just so fucked up.
Especially because anti-fatness is such a bonding point for people of all sizes, um, including some fat people, which probably is mostly like a self-protection mechanism for people, but it's just like it's like the water cooler talk, right? Like I don't know, I was like in my first kind of like more I guess like corporate space type of job in the past year. Um and like that was like the first thing I noticed was like the like thin people like pitching ideas that were about like the hatred of their own bodies or of their own pursuit of thinness or XYZ, and the assumption that that would be a bonding point as opposed to like a point of like active discrimination or whatever. um yeah, I don't know, it's wild to me, and it's also like I think about it a lot because I think about the things that are like protected classes, which like obviously like those protections are not actually real in most cases. But like, right, like legally, like there are protections for disabled people, right? Like there are like these things, but like whether or not it's real and whether or not they work is another conversation. But like it just kind of irks me because, like, in the United States, fatness technically is considered to be like a sickness or a disability, right? Like, quote, obesity, unquote, is like a disease, quote, unquote. So, like, technically, wouldn't fatness be a protected class if we're going to say that it's a disease?
It's so here's the thing. Like I don't mind her point. I don't mind it. The thing that I don't think that these guys get is that by and large the those that are obese still have a lot of the like accommodations that come with the general law of protection. Like they did in general. In general, I'm not gonna say for every because there's plenty of like small businesses or businesses that do shady dealings where you don't get those benefits. And again, this is kind of coming from my background more in government jobs, I guess, when I stop and think about it. But in general, like you can ask for aids or accommodations based on mobility without necessarily having to put forth any sort of medical documentation. So if they were to present um like a mobile issue from their doctors, they're saying that like they have this if they do have to present documentation. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do, now that I think about it, because I'm sorry I talk through this as I go. But sometimes they might have to present documentation to their manager. But it doesn't have to, even if it's from obesity, the job is still, because that is a medical diagnosis that someone can have, it still falls under ADA accommodation requirements. So even if the person has mobility issues due to their obesity, they still have to be accommodated within reasonable bounds that they would accommodate someone else with mobility issues as part of ADA regulations. Like that is true. They if they, especially if they have anything from their doctor saying, "Hey, this person requires a mobility aid," whether that's because of their obesity or not is basically not the job's business. If they have something documented from their doctor saying that this person requires a mobility aid, or other sort of accommodations, it is required that the job provide that. Whether that's because of their obesity or not is kind of beside the point. And quite frankly, none of the job's business. I have something here that from my doctor that says I need this. That is all you get.
Yeah, technically, technically, right?
It's just
Like,
something that I think about a lot. Like,
yeah.
just like the like hypocrisy of it, and like I don't know. I think about it so often.
There are a few places in the U.S. that do have protections for fat workers or for fat people. I don't. I know San Francisco does. I think D.C. does, and then Michigan. So it's like very
Michigan. Yeah.
sparse, but like there are.
So those accommodations though are just like what Fat Fab Feminist did, where it's just added to the general list of protections of race, creed, religion, um, gender, sexuality, that sort of thing. It's one of those things where it's just kind of tacked onto uh general non-discrimination things anyway. And while it is a form of legal protection, it generally won't change that much.
Just a handful of places that have legal protections against uh, for, for discrimination.
With policy, there's always what's written into law versus what actually gets enacted and like carried out, right? One of the things that I always want to explain to people, like when they pull out the ADA or something as an example of how like disabled people have protections or whatever, it's like there is what is law, and then there is what actually happens, which is complicated by, you know, a lack of accountability, people not having the resources to like literally legally fight cases of discrimination. There are, you know, there's a lot of stigma too that negates the concept of like, you know, discriminating against someone on the basis of their fatness as being taken seriously. Like these are not things that, even if there is a law, for example, that, you know, is based off of a very faulty idea of what disability is. You know, even if that exists, it doesn't mean that it's a protected, like an actual protected class. And that's why I always try to stay away from like what the law is as a reflection of how people are reflected, because so often a lot of that just like pays lip service, to these ideas of protection that still replicate hierarchical ideas about which bodies are good and which bodies are bad and which bodies deserve to be protected and which bodies don't. And like if we get back to, you know, the reason why these kinds of like mental toughness or just weight loss challenges in general are so popular in the workplace, it's for capitalistic reasons. It's because these programs are supposed to drive down costs associated with providing health insurance.
Yeah, that's literally
Like
what I was
that
gonna
is
say. It's all about insurance.
it's all
Like,
about
what the
insurance.
fuck?
It's not supposed and these beliefs about, you know, that losing weight will drive down insurance costs are based off of an inherent pathologization of fatness. There's this idea that it'll drive down insurance costs, that it'll make people come into work more often because they'll be less sick, that it'll make people more productive, like and that it'll like supposedly like create this culture of health and wellness in the workplace, which can't be further from the truth if we look at how people actually have to endeavor to lose weight in order to be successful in these weight loss endeavors. So like people have to kill themselves for capitalistic ideas in order to be viable, seen as viable employees by employers, and also to be socially accepted. And so you're fucked by both ends, basically. You can't win, you know, in terms of being a good employee, but also because people engage in anti-fatness as like a social activity, being a fat person is inherently socially discrediting. And so you have less clout as an employee, as a person, and there's literally no way to win.
Really like to hear your guys' opinion on everything she just said here. It's something I kind of want to sit on because I feel like there might be one of those, you know how like there's the occasional kernel of truth in there in what some of the fat acceptance people are saying. I feel like there might be a kernel in there. I just don't know where it is yet. But then at the same time, there's a bunch of shit that's just exaggerated around it. That's how I feel about it. I feel like kind of like with the people in the when the fat acceptance crowd say that doctors discriminate against fat people or doctors don't take fat people seriously. There are certain points where doctors don't take their fat patients seriously when they really should. And that does happen. So there's like these very individual, and I've noticed at least from the stories that I read, it most often is around reproductive problems, which while losing weight would definitely help it, sometimes there's like more serious issues that still should have been looked at or at least ruled out, like issues with endometriosis or uterine cancer or those sort of things that should have just been like tested to make sure that yes, they're experiencing this issue, but is it to the point where like it needs like serious medical intervention? So like there's certain points, there's like certain with very specific circumstances where okay, I see your point there. You that's not something that should have happened to you. That's something that should be taken seriously, blah blah blah. I get all that. But then you have the at the same time with the like doctors discriminate against us. You also have the person that has issue with their knee and the doctor says that losing weight will help their knee pain and then they get pissed off about it. And then they jump on the train of doctors are discriminatory as well. When for them, knee surgery won't be helpful because of their weight. Any issue with the joint itself, the muscle around it, and the weight that it bears all has to do with weight loss and strength training that the patient has to do themselves. So, like, there's a kernel of truth of like doctors disregarding fat patient concerns, but then there's also plenty of times where people are like being ridiculous, you know? And I feel like this is kind of one of those times, but I want to hear your opinions.
And so that's why it always comes back to like, I don't think that there will ever be a successful protection in law for fat people until we depathologize fatness itself. Because as long as our definition of what a disability is relies on these purely biological, physiological notions of inferiority, there will never be any real will to protect disabled people, whether they're fat or not. So.
Yeah, I wasn't
Oh, I know.
trying to say that
Yeah,
those are
yeah.
No, I know.
effective, but they just like they technically are there.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
wanted to say also that like I don't even know if a company that would institute something like this would even hire a fat person in the first place.
I don't think they would.
Yeah, so I don't even. This is interesting because it's like, I think this is probably impacting non-fat people. And I looked up the program, and the title of the book is 75 Hard: A Tactical Guide to Winning the War with Yourself. So this it reminds me of this
Not the
like
war.
enlightenment mind over matter, or the brain body split, right? And the really white supremacist idea that like we have dominion over our bodies, and that our bodies are a reflection of our mental capacity that underlies so much anti-fatness and like as anti-blackness, right? As shout out to Serena Striggs, that she's like outlined so much of this, but um that really feels like what is underlying this idea that like we are more, we can will ourselves out of our biological physiological needs just by like this mental strength that is false, and is completely about white supremacy and producing humans as superior to non-human animals, right? And this like just this biological hierarchical colonial division of the body and animals. And then yeah, just these like the program, it just feels like it likely could trigger illness in so many people, in terms of restriction, in terms of like work, the amount of time it requires you to work out. I also like, I'm curious if they are requiring this twice a day 45-minute workout to be on company time or not, because that would be like another factor of like how, like Brian was saying, it's like the company is imposing itself on personal life and trying to extend itself beyond just company time into producing the worker as this like viable, um, or as this like uniform subject outside of its um, the balance of the workplace. And then also like the drinking 4 liters of water per day, like um, that just reminds me of how like the narrative around how much water we should drink isn't based on any reality, and is all about like trying to make us feel full so we will eat less.
Literally, I
Right now we're entering conspiracy theory for me. Like the whole idea of how much water you should drink is about feeling satiated, and your body needs water. Your body needs water, and soda and just any sort of liquid doesn't necessarily cut it. Do you need to drink exactly 8 glasses of water a day? Not necessarily. Kind of depends on the climate that you're currently in, how much activity you're getting, how much you naturally sweat. But even if it's not like exactly 8 glasses, you still need to drink water. You still need to drink, and when you're thirsty, you should probably be drinking water. All right, I'm just gonna put that out there. I'm not saying that coffee's bad. I'm not saying that soda's bad. I'm not saying that. Well, I mean, soda really isn't ideal, but I'm not saying coffee's bad. I'm not saying adding flavors to water is necessarily bad. Although if you're like one of those water talkers that your water has 30 grams of sugar, it's basically a soda. If you want to drink tea, that's fine, but drinking plain water at least a couple glasses a day is really to your benefit. I'm not saying that you can't drink coffee, you can't drink tea, you can't drink juice, you can't drink whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you will notice a substantial difference in how you feel if you start incorporating just plain water into what you drink more often. You can still have the other stuff. You can still have the other stuff, but drinking actual water and not just getting all of your liquids from like soda or juice or whatever will help you. Like, this isn't just a conspiracy to help you lose weight or anything. Like, drinking actual water is important.
For a BuzzFeed video I was in, they like had me calculate the amount of water that I was supposed to drink per the like it's like per by your weight, I guess. And like literally it was like for like we live like the way that Vogue tells you to for a week. It was ridiculous. But like one of the things was like to drink enough water. And the thing that it said, it was like you have to I don't even remember what the calculation was, but basically I would have had to drink like 30 jugs of water to drink the correct amount of water, quote, correct amount of water. Like,
Okay, you say jugs. What is jug? Is that a gallon, a half gallon? Is that like a 40-ounce water bottle? What is a jug? What is a jug? Because a jug is not a unit of measurement that I am familiar with. So in any sort of objective measure. So could you please tell me? You say 60 jugs. I have no idea how much that is. But regardless, it does sound like a lot. I'm not going to say that it doesn't sound like a lot. And it's because of the morbid obesity. I think that once you go past a certain weight level, those sort of metrics probably shouldn't be used. Because 60 jugs, regardless of what that measurement is, um, sounds like a lot and sounds like it could be potentially harmful. Um, I would prefer you base your water intake more on how much you're sweating and how much activity you have. And as gross as it may be for some people, look at your pee. If it's cloudy, drink water.
for my
It's all water weight, Jordan. You just
size.
gotta pee it out.
And I was just like literally sitting at home, like drinking my water, being like, I don't understand how I could physically ingest this much water. Like, I just don't think it's possible.
And then you're spending your entire day peeing. Like, you don't
Yeah,
get to do anything else. You're gonna have to interrupt your 45-minute workout.
I will say, as someone that tried to do the drink a gallon of water a day, I don't really recommend that going that method. You will pee constantly and like be bursting. You have to pee constantly and you have to pee badly constantly. I It's one thing if you're working out a lot and you need to drink that full gallon of water every day if you're an athlete or whatever, but if you I have like moderately active, I will naturally drink probably a little over a half gallon of water a day. That's what I naturally tend to drink. I have a half gallon water jug. That's about, unless it's like a heat wave or something, that's typically about what I drink in a day. I'm not aiming to drink that. I just naturally drink that. That's what works for me. I do think that aiming to drink a specific amount isn't terribly helpful. I think it's better to swap out some of your like sugary drink intakes with water. I think that's a better method of water intake, personally.
8 times to go pee.
I'm done.
As
That was
someone
hilarious.
who drinks a lot of water, I can say you do disrupt everything having to pee. I wake up out
Oh,
of my
yes.
sleep having to pee. I have to get up from watching TV to pee. I have to, get up from meetings to pee. It's not enjoyable.
I am
Same.
speaking from personal experience.
Yes.
Same. I also,
Oh no.
I mean, I also drink a lot of water. And I agree, like peeing all the time. But I drink a lot of water because if I don't drink a lot of water, I get dehydrated. You know, like there's a reason why I'm drinking a lot of water. I wanted to touch on a couple of things that we've gone through. I wanted to just take a quick jump back to the ADA briefly, just because I do want to make a small, passionate, like, um, advocation for the ADA in the sense that, like, it it is an imperfect law, clearly. And I don't know if putting fat people under the ADA today would do much for fat people, honestly, because again, this like the reason the ADA worked when it did is because some of that work at that point had been done for some disabilities, right? And specifically, what you really saw was like easy, it was like baseline stuff that could get done, like making sure there's a wheelchair walkway into certain buildings, and even then there's a ton of carve outs, you know. But I think there is value, I believe, to some degree in having laws on the books. Again, we have to reconcile the fact that many people cannot access the ability to even be seen or protected under those laws. But but those laws have allowed for changes to be made. There is also a better way. I think that's really important to note. And then the other thing is just, did anybody see the follow up to this letter? Did anybody click through and see the follow up? So the person emailed back, and they said, "Well, here's a fun update. It turned out that 75 hard was the owner's idea to start with. A coworker saw my question on Ask a Manager. It was the Le Barf that gave me away. I need to come up with new commentary. And she told me almost nobody wants to do it, just nobody wanted to come forward. I sent the owner and my boss the clarification email and copied everyone who had a problem with 75 hard, approaching it as a group concern. Our entire team got an email from the owner saying she assigned 75 hard to our department specifically because we're too soft, in her opinion. She's been behind all of the other lifestyle reset BS from the start, assigning programs she thinks certain departments need, and it was 75 hard or quit. And I wanted to touch on this for two reasons. One, I have worked in a lot of companies.
Yeah, she's toxic. That's what that is. She's toxic. Um, I say you all look for new jobs as fast as you can and leave that fucking place because it's not gonna get better. If it's the owner that's wanting this, I feel bad mouthing the manager now, cause goddamn, sounds like she was thrown under the bus. Um, yeah, if it's the owner that wants to do that, you're never gonna win. You're never going to get relief. And I don't think that she would see her ways because people like that will typically double down as long as they need to, simply because they don't want to be like proven wrong, and simply because they don't want to admit that they're wrong, even if they have been proven wrong. So yeah, get the fuck out. Get the fuck out of there as fast as you can, and I hope her business suffered. But even then, like I just not a but so much because like she's still awful, but I think it's interesting that she's like, because y'all are too soft. So this wasn't about, it sounds like this wasn't about them necessarily being overweight, although soft, I could see how that would tie in there too. But given that 75 hard is typically meant as a mental toughness challenge, this was also maybe they were asking for longer timelines or certain work-life balance things, and she got sick of that and wanted to exploit their labor more, and so implemented this as a way to get them, I don't know, more compliant or something. I don't know. She sounds awful. But it sounds like it also wasn't entirely about weight and might also have just been a thing that she did because she didn't like that you guys weren't just jumping at her demands immediately all the time.
With HR departments, and I just want to say they are only there to protect the company. They are not there to protect you.
Yep.
You know, like you might get lucky with like an individual person at occasional times, but like HR departments will always be there to protect the company's bottom line and to manage out those employees that they need to who are causing too much trouble, or create a behavior modification to get them in line with what the company wants them to do. And this is a great example of that because it's straight up at the top here. Like it's straight up at the top. Even if there was an HR department like that, you think that HR director is going to want to be fired by the head of the company?
But it always is.
Yeah,
The tone
it
is set
always
from
is
the top. That was the thing that I thought, and I'm so glad you brought it up because that was one of my first thoughts when I was reading this the first time. She was like, "Oh, like should I email the president or whatever?" And I'm just like, you don't understand. They're in on it as well. And like, but now reading that update is wild because, I think that, I think, I think that this kind of thing where, I mean, it's already happening, but I think it's going to become even more common as startup culture just continues to get more and more toxic in particular. Like, startup culture is very much the outgrowth of, you know, tech bro, venture, finance bro, entrepreneurial, whatever, blah, blah, blah bullshit that relies on a lot of individualistic, frankly, white supremacist, ableist ideas about how to succeed. And that's because it's a perfect example of like capitalism unfettingly running a workplace. Like you're always scrambling against a limited budget. You're always scrambling for more funding. You're always scrambling for outcomes from XYZ private donor that is keeping your whole office going. And a lot of this shit is so like half-ass cobbled together that not having an HR department in these environments is like a norm, even though like the HR department is something that protects the company primarily. And like you said, you might get lucky with one person, but that doesn't mean that the HR department really gives a fuck about you. But it's like the things that make a normal workplace are often lacking in these environments. And the way that those are like prettied up, the way that inherent lacking is like dressed up as something cute is, with the whole like, oh, we grow together. You get out of it what you put into it. Um, the free gym access, the snacks, the whatever, the bullshit that fills in all the holes from a workplace environment like this. I hate startups. I fucking hate them. So
Also, yeah. Also, this the other thing about this whole mental toughness crap is like study, like as you pointed out, white supremacists, but not just that. Like specifically patriarchal white.
All right, I'm not ready to get into white supremacy, Jim Bro mental toughness challenges tonight. So I think we're going to go ahead and end it here. We have 25 minutes left. So I think that means I went through. I don't remember what number we started on. I'm afraid I don't remember. But we made some progress. I don't really have anything to add much to my what I'm reading because I'm just trying to. Next week is conferences, or the week that you guys will see this is conferences, and I'm just trying to survive through that. So I haven't really been reading as much. Nothing new, but I will say, there was one thing that came back, and I was super fucking psyched about it, and that was um what was it called? It's such a good one. It's such a good one, but the name isn't coming to me. It's How to Reject My Obsessive Ex-Husband. So that came back. It came back, and it's I feel like they changed a little too fast her opinion because the way it worked was she was neglected in a previous life and died trying to help her spouse, who she loved dearly but always felt coldness from him, and he kind of had almost he had some like really toxic traits about him that and like some serious red flags that was like, did he love her? Was he abusive? Whatever. And from his perspective, he was behaving a certain way because he wasn't from that world. He was kind of brought there, and then we're kind of getting an inkling that he was being manipulated by someone, and so he remained cold to her and wasn't very nice to her in order to protect her. And so now that they've been in his mind, he's traveled back in time. In her mind, she's died and been reborn as someone else. Um, he's like, well, now we're on my home turf, and the person that was manipulating him but isn't able to manipulate him this time. So he's trying to win her back, but she still was still like really hurt. This first chapter back, it's like she's already falling back in love with him. I'm like, wait, like I understand he did something really great. He did, and I understand her having some mixed feelings about that, but I feel like there's been a little too much of a 180 for my liking. I want her to still be a bit cold towards him and distant, but she's already falling back in love with him. Don't get me wrong. If he's not actually that toxic of a guy, I would love to see them together. That's fucking fine. That's great. But her attitude is shifting too quickly, and I don't like it. But that's pretty much the only one. We have reforming the obsessive male lead, but nothing much has really happened with them. The gray heiress of the empire, nothing much has happened with that yet. How to protect the male lead is still on hiatus. How to refuse the route is still over and upset me with how it ended. Not that it ended badly, but it was not well handled. It did not feel. It just felt like it ended abruptly. Oh wait, there is something that happened before I started really talking about what I was reading. Where to go? Tied to You. Tied to You is back. It is a BL romance that has it's all about soulmates. It has that whole soulmate, like what you read as a teenager on uh AO3. Like it has that mode. It is a guy that whose soulmate is his best friend's older brother who used to tutor him. And there's a whole story. I won't get into it but the new episodes are the epilogues, and it's about them kind of really embracing and navigating their new relationship. It's cute. It's simple, but it's cute. Okay, now I have nothing else to say. So I'm gonna end it here. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.